just press that and it should.
Okay, it says it's recording. So
Okay.
I didn't really know, but.
Yeah, no problem. It's all a learning process for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Okay, so I guess we can start. Do we have any other questions about the doohickey thing? I haven't put my part in, but I'll get it in like I have most of it written. I just need to go through it, and I was going to put it in like after this meeting.
That's fine. Yeah, as long as it's sometime today, I will. If everyone has it done, I may start working on it tonight. But I mean, if not, I can start in the morning. So
Okay.
I'll have mine done tonight. So what I do is I pop open the document and I put it into a thing called Bluebeam. And what I do is I break like the whole problem into like 3 categories. One, direct safety violations. The next category is how the employees are feeling, and then how the management is dealing with people. And I highlight it, so I break it all up so I can analyze it from those different sides. So when I do write, it's really thorough, and it helps me to write faster. So I will have it in tonight.
that's fine. Yeah.
Just 2.5 pages, single space. Does that sound right? Okay. Because I figure if we each of us probably do 2.5 pages, and you've got an intro and a conclusion, that brings us to about 8 pages altogether.
Yeah, I would think so. He said, yeah. What was pull out my
8 to 10 or 11 pages or something like that.
I think it was like 8, and then the word count was like. I mean, the word count, I can't remember. Let me look. If I can find doohickey problem. 8 to 10 pages in length. I think it was like, I can't remember. He listed a word count, but if it's 8 to 10 pages in length, I think we're good. And it needs to be in AMA or ALA style. Which I'm going to closely. Yeah. So I'm just going to closely, as far as the format, this example that he sent, I'm going to closely follow this because he said that was a strong A paper. So I figure, I think this is AMA. But yeah, so that's fine. Tonight is good. So,
okay.
And yeah, I think I sent a text, just include your your references and stuff.
I have a question for you on that. So obviously, the format, I know how to do all the citation and the bibliography and everything, but when we go ahead and give you what we have, and we have all of our citations that are linked with the text at the bottom, when you go to merge everybody's paperwork together, everybody's different parts, is there a way that you want us to do that so it's easier to keep all those notations together? Do you want us to just paste onto the Google Doc, or do you want each of us to give you a Microsoft Word doc?
You can what's easier for you guys? I was thinking you can probably just paste it onto the Google Doc, because I'm going to take everything. I haven't really used Google Docs very much, and I know Word. So I was just going to take everything, copy and paste it into a Word doc and format it there and send it in that way. But a Google Doc is just a way for you guys all to get your information on there. And then I'll take it and copy everything that you've written and paste it onto a Word doc and format it and edit it and all of that from there, if that works for you guys. And then if you want, I'm hoping to get done with it by tomorrow night. That's my plan, if all goes well. And if you want, I can email you. I'm trying to think. It would be good to have it I can paste it back into the Google Doc, as long as it'll retain the formatting. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with Google Docs.
You can send it as a Word.
You can upload a normal Word document into the Google Doc, and
it'll retain the formatting and everything. Okay,
it'll stay a Word document. It won't convert into it.
Okay, I didn't want it to convert to Google Doc. Yeah. So I can do that. Once I'm done, I can upload it back onto the Google Doc, and then you guys I can send you an email or text, and you guys can look at it just to see if there's any changes you want to make. I I am totally open to that. So if you want me to do that, that's fine. Does that sound good? Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I didn't have time to finish mine, but I'm going to finish it this afternoon.
That's okay, everyone. I just said, yeah, it's tonight sometime is fine. So
Thank you.
My next class starts in an hour, and so I have that until 5:30 Mountain Time. And then after I'm done with that class is when I'll probably have all that stuff finished up. So mine won't be done till tonight.
that's fine. Yeah, no problem. It would be iffy whether I'd get to it tonight anyway. I have like
Right.
a million my
Life.
son's basketball practice and this and that, and who knows what's going to happen. Nights blow up for me with my family, so all sorts of fun stuff happen unexpectedly. So once my family gets home, it's like, who knows. So it's probable that I won't get to it till tomorrow morning anyway, so that's fine. That's no problem. There was something else I was going to mention. Oh, just throwing this out there. I think I mentioned in our first meeting, my best friend, she took this class a couple of semesters ago with Brother Bonnie. And she goes, once we realize that you can copy and paste big chunks of information and put it in, like citing, as long as you cite your work, that was absolutely acceptable. She said they got A's on all their papers. And so she says, once we realized that we could do that, our papers were really easy. So I just thought I'd throw that out there to make it, that is totally acceptable, I guess, to do that according to her.
I did notice that in the example, they had like,
tons.
A page and a half of one section was just like, we found this on the internet.
Right. Just copied a quote. And as long as you cite it, it's all good. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. So.
Okay, well, are we ready for the discussion for today? I feel like weird bleeding. I feel like I'm a baby. But okay, so the first question we have to answer is, what is sexual harassment? So, anyone have any ideas?
Inappropriate touching.
Yes, unwanted, unsolicited sexual advances, inappropriate advances, I guess you should say.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. But, okay, so the next question is, based on Martina's story, does her situation constitute sexual harassment? And then, is it quid pro quid or hostile work environment?
I don't think it's quite to quid pro quo that.
I can never say that.
Pro quo. Is that what it's quid pro quo?
Yeah.
Because that, to me, it was definitely like if you don't do this, you're fired. And I didn't ever.
Well, I thought on the case it said like, well, I don't remember exactly. I have to pull it up. But didn't he say like, if you tell anyone, then like, I'll get you fired? I guess I didn't really know what quid pro quo was.
Quid pro quo, I think, is an exchange of something. Like the sexual nature of it is they're doing something to get something, whether it's not to lose your job or to gain a promotion or things like that. I'm pretty sure quid pro quo is like an exchange of, allowing it to happen in order to not be, not have a bad result happen.
Right.
So like as long as Martinez, as long as she's willing to put up with it, she gets to keep her job.
Yeah. And that's quid pro quo, sexual harassment.
Yeah. It says here on that note on the law of sexual harassment, it says, just like you said, Caitlin, quid pro quo, I can never say it, harassment involves a proposed exchange of a job benefit for sexual favors. And it's basically the sleep with me or you're fired scenario type of thing. So I would say probably, I know what you're referring to, Paisley. He was saying like, I think he put his hand up her skirt and he was like, don't tell anybody, I'll just deny it.
Yeah.
But I would think it would probably fall more on the harassment, whatever the other one was.
Hostile work environment.
Yeah, hostile work environment, harassment, probably. That would be my opinion anyway.
It's possible that it is quid pro quo. We just don't have the evidence of that. Like we don't have anywhere that's saying that her boss would fire her for sure.
Right. She didn't mention him saying something like that, but it could have happened. Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Yeah, because in the question it says there is not enough information to say it's quid pro quo, but she mentions that she's afraid of being fired, so
That's
like it could
true.
imply it. But
Well, and that's a good point, Paisley, because when she finds out the guy, brings her into his office and is like, look, I'm sorry, I overheard your phone call and I called our legal department, and she got really upset. She's like, I don't want to get fired. I don't want this to get out. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
She was worried about it getting out and she didn't want anybody to know. And so, yeah.
So the next question is, from reading the note on sexual harassment, do you think DeCoste got accurate advice when he called the council's office?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. It sounds like they were following like procedure, in accordance with law. So.
Why might a lawyer representing the company insist on instituting a formal investigatory process?
Why would they want to investigate it?
Yeah.
To get rid of it. If Martinez is going to be serious and if she wants to get rid of it, then she could come up with her own evidence and go to somebody outside the company and sue the company for the harassment and not just the guy, what's his name? French. So the company lawyer, they would want to have it in their own control. Find out if the company's lawyer is in charge of getting whoever in trouble, they can only get French in trouble. But if Martinez goes outside the company, then she could get the whole company in trouble.
Right. If they don't do anything,
then the
company's liable too. So they have to cover their own butts basically and show that they investigated the matter. And
yeah, which in today's world, that would be very devastating to the company if they had a whole harassment lawsuit against the whole company. That would be
went through something similar, and I was reading through that case a little bit and how Julia was just so afraid about talking about the issue that even though things were supposed to be confidential, she was so worried and sick about it because she didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't know that stuff was going to stay confidential, and she was worried for her job. Now, okay, have any of you guys ever heard of Pizza Pie Cafe?
Yes, we have one here. I've been there, here in Arizona.
Okay, so there's one up here in Idaho Falls, like one of the original ones. Mm-hmm. And when I was working one of my first jobs when I started college, I started up there, and I had a manager named Tyler Tapp who moved to corporate and started overseeing a lot of the stores after he got promoted. Huge brown noser, but oh my gosh. Anyways, so I started working there for a year, and then I quit, and I had a short brief time where that manager had asked me out on a date, and I went on a date with him. It never amounted to anything. Eventually, I started working at that job again. He was no longer the store manager of that store, and he moved on to a corporate position, and I had a new store manager. Well, at the time that I had returned to my job, I actually met my husband at that job as we were paying to go to school. And as I was dating him, Tyler got jealous because I was starting to date this guy I worked with. So he started to make my job really difficult for me. And he started to harass me at work. And really, even though it wasn't like he was coming up and saying sexual things about me, being harassed for the fact that I was dating somebody else and I wasn't interested in him is sexual harassment. So I reported confidentially the situation to one of the managers. The manager went directly to Tyler, and they pulled me into the office and they fired me for it. And he said he talked to the owners of Pizza Pie Cafe, and the wife was on board with it. And so I was in a position where I could have sued Pizza Pie Cafe for sexual harassment and for the fact that I was fired because I reported my boss for sexual harassment. And the owners of the company were then brought into the implications. But I was a month from getting married. And then right after that, I was a newlywed, and I just decided it wasn't worth it. But I wish I had followed through and I had done a lawsuit against that company. I really wish I had. I think sometimes we forget that sexual harassment isn't always about like having, you know, somebody like make comments about like your physical body or trying to get you to do sexual favors. Sometimes it's just a matter of, you know, them abusing their position to make you uncomfortable because they can have something they want from you because of your sex.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's very true. It's not always necessarily them making overt sexual advances towards you. It can be them just generally harassing you because, and I think it mentioned that at the beginning of that really tedious, boring, the note on, it was so hard to read through.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it talked about that, how back in the 70s or something, they changed it to include that, where it's not just about overt sexual advances, but also just any kind of harassment because of your sex, you know? So that's a good point. That's a really good point.
And super ridiculous.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that is so unprofessional.
I'm still mad about it. They don't have an HR. They're an LLC franchise, and they didn't have an HR department. So the only person I could talk to was my manager. And then what's interesting is that manager ended up getting fired later by that same guy for something ridiculous. But Tyler really shouldn't be in a position where he's working corporate, because I watched so many women miss out on promotions, and there were girls he'd be interested in who would end up being let go because they weren't interested in dating him. But he wasn't allowed to date the people who worked there anyways.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what his game was, but he ended up getting married and having a baby and stuff. And I just look at him and I just think, oh, you're such a pig.
Yeah.
He makes me really mad. I don't think he has any business being in a leadership position.
No.
It's too bad that, like, it's hard to believe sometimes that stuff goes on, but somehow people turn it around in their minds and make it okay in their minds. It happens all the time. It kind of boggles my mind that people just do that, but they do all the time, unfortunately, you know?
Well, and another thing, and this Lone Star talks about it, that the cost was kind of like, well, what if she's not the only one that's being harassed? What if friend is harassing other people? Like, who's going to stop it? It has to start with somebody.
Yeah. And it's, you know, before the laws really, I mean, especially in corporations, I mean, you can't, unless people choose not to report it, you know, if somebody reports it, they come down hard because they have to protect themselves.
Yeah.
But it's still like in smaller businesses. I was telling Krista last week, I used to work for a mortgage company. I was an office manager, and just blatant things went on all the time. But people wouldn't, you know, it was a small family-owned business. I was HR, basically. And people would come to me and talk. And I'm like, we need to report this. And they would, you know, there was nobody to report it to other than like the authorities, because, you know, we didn't have a legal department. You know, it was a very small family business. And anyway, but people did that, you know, they're like, no, I don't want to lose my job. I'll just put up with it, you know. And there were the vice presidents and the owner of the company were blatantly, you know, just making overt sexual advances towards female members of staff, you know, and it was crazy, but it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The world sucks, but honestly, that's what it really comes down to. People are just crusty. But
yeah, good word.
Back to the case, how would you guys evaluate Jack DaCosta's options at this point? So, I mean, one of them that we talked about was that he can report it to the office, or he, I guess, just doesn't do anything about it. Do you think there's other options for him to choose?
I mean, technically, nobody knows it was him that called.
That's
just
true.
Him and Martinez right now. So, like, really, he could choose. He could either not report it or report it.
It's a hard one because she's begging him not to do it.
Right.
But
morally, his only choice is to report it, I think.
Right. I agree.
Well, once he hears, though, that there's been, I honestly think that when it moves from being verbal and it moves to a physical assault, the man physically took his hand and put it inside of her shirt and grabbed her breast. And he said, "Don't scream. It's my word against yours. No one's going to believe you." And so, I mean, I think once it's reached a physical point, I think you have a moral obligation that it has to be reported. It doesn't matter that this guy might be the owner of a company or something. If you're HR and some woman comes up to you and says, "This man put his hands on me," that's it.
Yep.
I think that's it. And then I think if they need to operate or get some kind of cameras in there or try to find a way to catch the guy and just be patient for a little bit, because if the guy has already progressed to that behavior on a regular basis, only when people aren't around, they get a camera somewhere because they're on company property, that's legal, then, and you know, she says kind of the areas that this guy attacks her, I honestly think that he could find a way to, if she doesn't want to tell anyone, then she doesn't have to tell anyone. They could just get it on camera. I had a boss who got fired from a job. They found out he was putting cameras in the dressing rooms at the store. When I was like 19, I found it like one of my first jobs, and you know, nobody knew about it, but they found out that he was putting cameras in dressing rooms and stuff like that, and it was a big deal. But I honestly think that, yeah, you can't. I don't know. I guess just my main thing is I keep rambling is once he's made a physical assault on her, because that's assault.
Yeah.
You know, once he's done that, I mean, I don't think you can just pretend that that hasn't existed anymore. That's a serious accusation.
Well,
that's not this guy made me feel uncomfortable. No, this is a
Right.
man who sexually grabbed your breast and
yeah.
intimidated you.
Well, and like it was mentioned before, he could be doing this to other women, and they're staying silent too
Oh,
because
yeah.
they're in fear for their jobs. And yeah, I think like what you said, Krista, morally he has an obligation, even though that girl is begging him, but she may not be the only victim. You know, it's very possible that she probably isn't, if he's, you know, progressed, like you said, Caitlin, to that point where he is physically touching and assaulting women, you know, that way.
When's
Sexual.
the next time it's going to be a rape or something?
Right.
You don't know. And
Yeah.
the thing of it is, I think it's obvious that this is not the only woman he's ever sexually harassed, or probably isn't the only one in the company, because for a man to act that way, it means he's done it before and he knows he can get away with it because no one reported him. This kind of behavior is progressive behavior. Like psychologically, like if you were to look at this from that kind of standpoint, this is a person who's pushed the limits. And he pushes it, and when he doesn't get caught, he pushes it further. It's the same kind of thing like what murderers do when they become serial killers.
Yeah.
They don't just like start off as mass murder. Like they start off on
they
small
push the boundaries.
things, and they push it to see how many times they can do it without getting caught. This guy is, and for him to be as cocky and arrogant about it as he is, about there's nothing you can do, no one's going to believe you, it means obviously he's been accused and he's gotten away with it before.
Very possibly, yeah. That makes sense.
So
I'm very passionate about this subject.
Fair enough, man.
Good.
So if we decide, so I think most of us agree that we would report, well, all of us. But if we're going to report it, then what will we explain to Julia Martinez about our decision, like why we're reporting it? And then are we willing for her to get fired over this?
It's a hard one.
She shouldn't be fired. Like there's no, if she does get fired, she should definitely sue the company.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think one of the things that I feel like if I was in this situation, I feel like, again, like it's my moral obligation to report it. And I just have to explain to her, like, you don't deserve to be treated like this. Like, no one does. So, like, honestly, if you're going to get fired, then at least you can sue the company for being horrible. But
yeah.
What
was the first part of the question?
How will you explain it to her, like that you're going to report it?
I think just because it's mandatory. I mean, her concerns are that she'd be fired and that her husband would get really angry. Like, was she referring to he'd come after French? Her husband would?
Yeah, that he had a
she
temper.
mentioned that he had a really violent, well, I don't think violent was the word used, but that he had such a temper. But apparently his temper was notorious because she says, you know how he gets. Like,
Yeah.
so
That,
he's known for being out of control when he gets angry.
and that
So
she was a, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. The other reason to report it is to keep it all legal, and hopefully that would help her husband to not feel like he needs to take control.
Right.
So that the authorities are taking care of it, and he needs to stay out.
Step back. Yeah.
You,
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no,
Caitlin.
you continue. I've been talking a lot.
No, that's fine. So have I. I just, a point that could be made to her, I'm, if he decides he needs to report it, is, I understand this is hard for you, but it is very probable that you are not the only woman he's doing this to.
Yeah.
And what about these other women who are being harassed? We can't, as a company, let somebody do this to the employees here. It has to be investigated, so that's one thing I might, if I were in his position, that I might say to her, this could be affecting others besides you, and that are afraid to come forward because they don't want to lose their jobs either. This is not something that you can legally lose your job over.
Yeah.
Basically the purpose of the investigation is to protect you as well, I can't remember what her name was, but this is to protect you as well. You can't legally be fired over this.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, what proof does, if we say we all agreed that she couldn't get fired, what proof does she have of harassment? Because right now all she really has is her word. So is there anything else that I guess would show that she's being harassed?
I like Caitlin's idea of putting some cameras up.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That would definitely solve the problem. One thing I remembered from, I don't know if we read it last week or the week before, one of the things that we needed to read, it says most of these cases are circumstantial, and they're decided on circumstantial evidence. But I think the fact that she did not come to him willingly and say, this is happening. He walked in and accidentally overheard a conversation with her crying. And that is pretty strong circumstantial evidence, That's pretty strong. So that he overheard a conversation. She did not she was talking to whoever, a friend or family member or what have you.
Her sister.
That's right. And that's, most of these cases are from, that reading, it said that.
I think that was in the employee vignettes that we read.
Yeah. So, but I like the cameras too.
Yeah, I like
I'm reading the
that would be surefire.
I'm reading the case right now, and she's talking to, doesn't it say it's her sister on the phone?
Yeah.
Right.
And she's sitting there talking about how the way that he's harassing her and how he crowds, brushes up against me in the hall or the elevator, and he does things quickly, discreetly, and he's careful. It says he's careful when anyone else is around. It's only when we're alone. But yesterday when I took some papers into him, he put his hand right inside my shirt. Don't scream, he laughed. I'll just deny it. And she's actually in this process where she's thinking about, maybe I can get a transfer. Maybe I can transfer to another branch of the company. And I don't think it's fair for her to be sent to a new location and, have all those moving costs and everything. But, I think, one of the solutions to figuring out how to get this to stop is maybe this guy needs to be given some kind of, just say, hey, you're being investigated for something. While this occurs, you are only going to be allowed to interact with people in this way and this way. If you have to deal with a female employee, there has to be such and such present until we can get this taken care of. And if you don't agree to that, then any implications that come forward are going to stand as a testament against you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Good point.
A lot of times talking to people enough straightforward and direct to let them know, hey, people are watching you. If you don't want to lose your job, something's got to change. But
Well,
I
and
think
that
the guy deserves to be fired, but
yeah, but that might, like you said, that might be enough to scare the crap out of him. And the fact that you're being investigated, we have reason to investigate you to make him stop,
And sometimes just transferring her, like I think transferring her would probably eliminate a lot of stress from her life, but it's not going to get over the fact that the company moved her to keep her quiet, and she's not going to ever emotionally feel safe in that company again, knowing that that company wasn't willing to actually fire someone. It would be easier for them to move her. I think the only situation in which transferring her wouldn't look bad on the company is if the guy was fired and she was transferred, if the investigation continued after she left.
Right.
I don't think that just transferring her would be enough to make it go away.
Well, and she's saying when he, I can't remember the guy's name, but he said, he pulled her into his office and said, look, I'm sorry I overheard this conversation, and talked to our legal department. They're saying I need to do this. And she's begging him not to. She's like, look, I'm trying to apply for a transfer. I'm trying to, and he even is thinking to himself, because he knows the state of the company, where there's probably not going to be a transfer. It's not even going to be possible because the company's downsizing as it is, so that's
and
not
the
even.
thing of it is, he's HR. He works for the company. He's not union. He's not working for the people. He's there to help people in human relations, in the company.
He's not.
But he works for the company, so his obligation is to keep the company from having a huge lawsuit and from being destroyed. And so HR's responsibility is to take care of this issue, take care of her, and eliminate the problem. He works for the company. He has an obligation as that part of his position. Keeping it quiet would do nothing good for the company, and it wouldn't do anything good for him. Because if this guy continues to act this way and he knows it's unethical, then he has to do something. It's part of his job. I think we forget that. We think, sometimes that HR is all about like helping us, but no, HR, they work for the company.
Right.
This DeCoste guy who overheard the conversation, he's just an engineer in the company. He's not.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he was HR.
This is an HR situation, but I mean, like what legal told him. It doesn't matter what department he's in; he needs to support it. But while you were talking about that, I was thinking, because the company is downsizing and people are losing his jobs, the reason he was at the office so early is because he's trying to make sure that he's on top of everything so that he isn't one that's going to lose his job. And so I wonder if part of him is going to be worried to report this to risk his job.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to bring this up and bring up issues with the company, and people might think, well, you're just trying to stand out, or you and Martinez are on a team and you're causing problems. We're just going to help you.
That's a good point. That could be very possible.
Yeah, because reporting stuff for other people is a big deal. Like, you guys, when you guys had your meeting last week, did you guys have a chance to read any of the stuff I submitted about my experience at that sporting goods store?
Yeah, I read some of it. Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Sorry.
And so I had an experience where I had a gentleman who was stalking me at my job, and I'd had over a year of reports against this guy to corporate, and they kept telling me, they're like, he does seem to be coming in on the days that you're working. They're like, but we don't want to lose a customer. So, we'll just be nice to him, and we'll tell him he's required to he has to stand at the gun counter and wait for someone to come help him. Well, I'd had a year of complaints against this guy and his behavior. And it got to the point where he didn't even, he'd pull into the side of the building and we could see on the cameras, and he'd look to see if my car was there. And then he would go in the store and he would just directly go find me wherever I was and follow me around. So I'm complaining to my boss and I'm saying I don't feel safe. And they just told me it was ridiculous. Well, the guy ended up following me home from work. And the guy's my father's age, follows me home from work. And so I immediately, I go to the police station, and then the police come to my work, and a detective comes and chews out all of my managers and is you have a year of reports here and you haven't done anything. So then corporate got involved, and then they ended up having to hire a security guard to be at the store until the guy came in and they arrested the guy and made him sign a no trespassing warrant and all this other crap. But, you know, at that point, you know, my bosses, my managers, corporate was considering firing every single one of the managers because they're like, she has documented reports against this guy for over a year and you guys have done nothing. And the company was in big trouble. They spent a lot of money with hiring that security guard. And in the end, I was actually supposed to go to college my first semester, and then I was supposed to come back and work on my off track. And because of the incident, they wouldn't give me my job back because they said I was high risk.
Wow.
Dang.
That's intense, man.
I have a lot of experience in a lot
Yeah,
of
you do.
Too bad.
That sucks. It's sad that happens so often, you know?
Okay, well, mostly Caitlin answered a lot of the questions that.
Sorry.
Not Caitlin.
It's okay, it's fine. I mean, it was group discussion, but like it was just like, does filing a harassment claim prevent them from being fired? And we said no, and then you shared your experience with Pizza Pie, of course. And then it was mostly just more questions if he has an ethical duty, which we all agreed that he does. And we skip past those because we kind of answered all of those. Okay, so now I'm going to assign each of you a role. So what it wants us to do is to create a new sexual harassment policy, and like, I'll read it to you, but so each of you are going to get a role. So Caitlin, you're going to be the accused harasser.
All right.
You have so much experience with that.
Krista, you're going to be the bystander. And then Mary Ann, you're going to be the potential victim of harassment. And so with your role, I guess you can go each at a time. I don't really know what it kind of wants us to do, but so identify the most important thing you want to see in the new policy and procedures that your organization is formulating to govern sexual harassment issues. Be prepared to defend your choice, as other people might not agree with them. So I guess like, since like, for example, like Caitlin's like the accused harasser, what she wants to do, I guess, like what she wants in the new like guidelines, like I guess to protect her, like just from what you would want if you were in that person's shoes. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So just think about that, I guess, for a minute. It said think about it for 15, but that's a really long time.
Yeah. That's a long time.
And so once you think about it, then I guess you can talk about it. Yeah. So
go ahead.
So my role was the legal counsel.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I was just thinking is that if we're going to create like a new policy or whatever, I want something that's going to protect the workers in my company to make sure that I'm not getting sued.
Mm-hmm.
So I want it to be something that people feel like they can report easily, so then I'd be able to shut down the issue as soon as I can so I don't end up getting sued.
That's a good, yeah. Sorry. Forgot to turn off my phone. Sorry. As a potential victim, if I were a victim in a sexual harassment situation, I would want the company's policies to be where I feel comfortable, because I can understand, I've been in situations too where I have felt hesitant to say anything because the policies of the company I worked for, I did not feel like they were in my favor or that they protected me. I feel like that the policies fell on the side. It was it was my burden to prove. Like I would have to come up with, I would be suspect from the beginning. I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
But So if I were someone who was a victim, I would want policies in place for that company to where I would feel comfortable, like I would feel protected if I came forward and you know, stated what was going on, if I filed a report or what have you. That's what I would want.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah. Thanks.
I feel like as a bystander, there really isn't like I would want whatever the victim wants, or the potential victim. So I would want to make sure there's like job protection there. I guess for me too, I would want there to be, if somebody's going to be a witness, then they also are not allowed to be fired for being a witness.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to be saying something about what I would want to see, or how I would word it to keep my job if I was the harasser?
So
That's a hard one.
Okay, so if that's the case, okay, so I'm just going to go kind of over some of like sexual harassment law. Okay, so one of the first things that has a huge effect on sexual harassment is, and it still holds up in court today, whether it seems fair or not, is how the person is dressed when you attack them. And it sounds so politically incorrect right now, but that law currently still stands that if it seems like a person was dressed provocatively, like her blouse was open enough that I could slide my hand into her shirt easily, and there was no her yelling at me later about it, and it seemed like she didn't care, there's actually a part in law that gives me a little bit of leverage where I wouldn't be as in big of trouble, apparently. There's also, because this doesn't seem to be like like as an attacker, I'm specifically saying if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. He's never mentioned anything about firing her. So it's more of a hostile work environment harassment. And apparently, if the person is able to efficiently do their job, she may be experiencing emotional distress, which could get me in trouble. But if she's able to efficiently do her job, she's never and her work performance is the same. If I can prove that her work performance hasn't changed and she didn't freak out like when I made the initial advance, that actually plays to my advantage. She would, if her work performance was sliding downhill and she then went to HR and was crying and talking about what was going on, that would be a huge negative. But in this case, she hasn't done that. So I think one of the things that protects me is the fact that her work performance apparently isn't sliding downhill.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to read the actual little policy on the harassment. Really, really hard to try to defend someone sexually harassing someone, but I'm just saying if that's with me, I probably would have read that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess another way to think of it is, if this will help you too, is what if you were falsely accused as the harasser? What would you want then in order to protect you?
What would I want then in order to protect myself if I'm being falsely accused? Well,
yeah.
Liability for harassment. Let's see. So if I am being accused of harassment, let's see. So I would have to be able to defend myself. And this is a case where obviously I'm having to defend that I haven't done something. So I have to be able to prove that my behavior had nothing to do with quid pro quo, obviously. One, that's the first thing I would have to prove is if I'm being accused of quid pro quo, I'd have to be able to show that no, none of my behavior had anything to do with them retaining a job or anything in regards to that, or receiving promotions or anything. So I would have to be able to defend that on that standpoint. I think the other thing that I would probably have to look at in that situation is, one of the things I would have to probably look at, I think would be wise, is to see, have they accused anybody else of sexual harassment falsely in the past? Sometimes a woman who goes from company to company and accuses people of sexual harassment can actually discredit herself in the future, especially if none of that's ever been true. So I would actually want to actually dig into probably that person's history as well. I'm just trying to think of ways to defend myself because I've never had to think of that before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's a hard one. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there are cases where people are falsely accused as well. There are, I think it's, in comparison to how many women are sexually harassed, it's definitely a much lower number, but I would think. But I have been witness to somebody being falsely accused, and it can destroy people's lives too. So
oh yeah,
I think, there has to be, a thorough investigation, like a policy, a policy of thorough investigation in place because that does happen. People do look for ways to sue and look for, ways to entrap people. That does occur as well. So
one specific thing that I have seen is a man was having an affair with somebody, and then he decided to stay with his wife. And so then the woman he was having an affair with, they had a perfectly normal relationship other than it being an affair. Like, it was totally consensual and whatever. But as soon as he told her that he was going back to his wife, that was when she decided it was all harassment and assault and everything. It's ruining his life right now.
Yeah.
And, I mean, so that would probably be another thing to put in the policy of, were they in a relationship? And there are companies where you do have to formally let the company know that we're in a relationship. And I wonder if that's...
But who's going to do that during an affair?
Right.
But I think that your point, though, was super important. That's why, like, have you guys ever seen the TV show The Office?
Yes.
Like, you've seen how, like, important it is that, like, Michael and Jan were supposed to disclose that they were in a relationship first, and that became a huge part of one of the lawsuits they were in, was because they didn't have appropriate documentation of when they were or when they were not in that relationship. So I think, Krista, that was a really good point.
It is a good point. And that's probably why several larger companies at least do that. You have to sign something that's saying we're in a consensual relationship, we're dating. So there can't be any in the future if a situation, like you said, Caitlin, if he's having a secret affair, he's probably not going to do that because he doesn't want people to know he's cheating on his wife. But that's why companies do that. And at a job I used to work at, I witnessed a woman, she was really sexually harassing him. He was a really good guy, and I had worked with him for a long time. He worked right next to me, and he was happily married. He was a good person, and she would repeatedly make advances toward him, and he made no bones about the fact that he was not interested, that he was happily married, that he respected her as a person, but he had no interest in having any sort of, contact outside of work with her. I mean, he was very blatant, and she did not let up. I mean, and I told him at one point, you're being sexually harassed. It doesn't happen very often, but men get that too. And he did have that situation where when he refused her advances, she claimed that he was sexually harassing her out of vindication. And I had been a witness to it, and I had to, testify, not in a court of law or anything, but when they investigated it, I said, no, I've seen her repeatedly make advances toward him and wanting to go out with him. And he has made no bones about the fact that he was not interested in her. He did not do anything inappropriate, but it was very, very stressful on him and his family and his life. And so there does have to be some sort of safety net in place for people who do that,
Right.
So interesting.
I think somebody earlier, I don't know which one of you it was, but they mentioned burden of proof. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what we're supposed to get from like this part of the assignment is that it's not just the victim's like viewpoint that we have to look at, even though I feel like that is the easiest for us to do because
Right.
I don't know, like especially as women, we see it a lot in the workplace. And so I guess one of the things we just need to keep in mind is that when there is a policy in place, who do we need to be protect? Who needs to be protected? And then I guess like how are you able to like satisfy everyone? Because like even though it's hard to think, well, the harasser needs to be protected, like if like you guys said, if they're being falsely accused, then at that point, then it's just not fair to them.
It's a delicate balance. It would be hard.
Yeah.
They definitely need to be right.
100% satisfy everyone. I just don't think you can make everyone happy in that situation.
It would be really hard.
But I think there definitely need to be rights for even if whoever is accused of the sexual harassment is guilty, I think there needs to be rights for them. And I personally, I feel like it might not be absolutely necessary that they get fired. I mean, human mistakes happen all the time. And when sex is involved, sexual anything, that's where the human brain is.
Yeah, people get stupid.
Well, there are some people who don't have a great gauge for seeing how they're emotionally affecting other people with their behavior.
Right.
My husband, for instance, when we worked together, like he would come up behind me and he would touch my waist or, you know, grab onto my hip as he was reaching for something. And I like told him, I'm like, you touch me again, I'm going to break all your fingers. And he thought it was a joke because he didn't get it. And we were talking about it after we got married with our family. And my brother works for corporate and Amazon. And he goes, hey, Jake, just heads up. In any future job you have, you can get fired for that kind of behavior. Just be lucky you ended up marrying her out of it. He goes, because she could have reported you and it could have turned out bad. And he's like, well, I didn't think I was sexually harassing her. He's like, yeah, in like most like work policies, that's sexual harassment. And he's like, he goes, you know, so like the whole point of it is like, to me is like, you know, just trying to understand what you're saying is, you know, having the rights for the person who is being the harasser. They might not necessarily know or understand what they're doing is harassment.
Well, and there was that one example, or I think it was a quiz question or something. You know, it said this man would repeatedly, her boss or her supervisor would come up behind her and like massage her shoulders, but she didn't find it, to her personally, she didn't find it offensive. She was fine with it. So would that be considered sexual harassment? I think the correct answer was no. I think it was no because she didn't consider it. She didn't consider it.
And if there's not a policy in there about employees aren't allowed to massage each other, then unless she reported it, it's not.
Some policies are very specific about how you're allowed to touch people, and it doesn't. I was an EFY counselor.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to hug the kids. You can give them side hugs.
Yeah.
Right.
And that, I mean, and a lot of the kids hate that rule. They love their counselors. They want to give them hugs and everything. But that is the EFY policy, that you just don't. No front hugs. So.
That's interesting. Yeah, I used to drive a school bus for a little while part-time, and I did special needs kids. And, you know, a lot of them, like, and I love little kids, like they're so, you know, and they're affectionate and they want to come up, you know, and give you, like at Christmas time, they would make me little gifts and they would come up and they'd want to give you a hug, and you had to be really careful about how you had contact with these kids. There were very specific rules. So, and I understand the reason, but yeah, it is, you know, the kids want to, you know, I don't know, they want to do that. They want to give you a hug. That's not uncomfortable for them, but you have to be so careful in those situations. It's hard.
Yeah. I think this brings up like another good point, that when like deciding a policy is also just sharing the information, because I know that like in the case when the Costa guy or whatever saw that happen. He didn't really know anything about what the company's policy was. And so that is something that, like, I don't know, like sometimes, like I know when I've gotten jobs, like we do like a quick training, like we kind of go over it. I think it's important to go more in depth about it, because like that can just save like time, tears, a lot of things. But
I worked for a car dealership, and we had sexual harassment training every 6 months.
Wow.
And it was individual, so it was like a learning module on the computer.
Oh, okay.
But we had to go through the policies every 6 months.
Yeah, because then I think like we're about to find out what happens in the case, but if Julia said, oh, he's been doing this, and they said, well, he didn't know about it, then like he can protect himself that way. So I think by just having trainings and stuff like that, it can help him.
Well, even in my calling in church right now, I'm Cub Scout committee chair. And I think it's at least once a year, I have to do the same thing, Krista. I have to do this online module about, appropriate and inappropriate contact with the boys, so everyone is on, like, it's just, that's the world we live in now. You have to do that,
Well, and look at what the church has done with the Boy Scouts of America program. They've backed out because there's just been so many problems with it. Yeah, I think that was,
Well, it's true. And even, I don't know if I'm here in Arizona, but in all the church buildings here, they've put windows on all the doors, like the classroom doors and the bishop's office.
In the bishop's office, wow.
On the bishop's office, and primary teachers now. I used to be in the primary presidency in my old ward, and you always have to have 2 teachers. In Cub Scouts, my den leaders, they always have to be 2. It's the 2 deep rule. There always have to be 2 leaders at all the the den meetings. And if you're transporting boys to an activity, there has to be 2 leaders in the car. It gets really tricky sometimes, because it's like, okay, we can't fit all the boys in the car if we, or we have to get parents to help to drive because we don't have enough, enough room. It gets really tricky, but that's
to protect everybody. Where if one of the adults, if they are going to do something bad, the other adult can be there to be like, stop.
Exactly.
What's going on? And then if one of the kids accuses one of the other ones,
somebody's there. It's totally, it's needed. It's sad that it's needed, but it's needed, So
I'm glad though that it's something that's been worked out and that we are using, because I've had a lot of church callings, but I was a primary teacher, and there were some weeks that my husband, who was supposed to be teaching with me, he had to be at work. And so those days, like, the best I could do is I had to leave the door open. And, my class was like, they were like the 5-year-olds. And so the other teachers would come and they'd want to shut my door because they're being loud. And I said, you can't shut my door. It's just me.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, I don't know exactly what the church policy is, but I'm pretty sure sisters are allowed to be alone. It's the brothers that have to have 2, at least in primary. I don't know. And Cub Scouts is probably different.
But I think, we're about, and we've talked a little bit about women accusing men in the past, but I think thank you, Josie. We're about to see a huge like upcoming of women being accused of sexual assault, because I think people don't understand that there are a lot of female sexual predators. And I mean, even harassment is a form of sexual, being a sexual predator, and so I think that we're about to see a lot of that. Like, as a child, my abuser was a woman. And so I've gone to therapy for that, and it's impacted me my whole life, where like, I do fine when I'm in a business full of men, but I work with women. I don't know how to interact with them socially. I don't know how to talk to them very well, because of, trauma. And so I think, though, that we're going to start to see a huge shift in women being responsible for harassment claims.
I agree.
There's no longer going to be this damsel in distress mindset anymore. It's going to be people are people.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to read the case now. I think we've had a very good conversation or discussion. But so this is a real case, and the company and individuals haven't changed, but this is actually what happened. And when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh. But so when Jack called corporate counsel, he forgot about caller ID. The lawyer used the information he gave her to figure out the people he was talking about. she contacted the Lone Star EEO, which launched a formal investigation. The EEO tried hard to get Martinez to cooperate. French denied all charges, claiming that Martinez had made up her story to protect herself from pending layoffs. DeCoste was asked for evidence, but he didn't have any. Julia Martinez's husband found out what was going on, beat up Julia, and forced her to quit. French survived the investigation with only a bruised reputation. He blamed everything on DeCoste for calling corporate counsel. There was so much animosity between DeCoste and French that DeCoste left the company after 3 months. So,
Wow.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I thought it was going to be happier like that, like French got fired, but
Yeah.
it's really
Jeez.
sad that Julia got beat up too. I feel like
Her husband beat her up?
her husband beat her up.
Oh
And
my
she-
God.
Allowing that to
afraid of
happen.
what he did to the company. She was afraid of her husband.
Yeah, what a jerk.
She
Jeez.
believed him.
Some
Yeah.
man touched her, and no one else had the right to touch her, so he beats her up.
Yeah.
Ah,
Well,
what
that
I'm
is
saying.
typical abuser,
Yeah.
especially an abusive marriage.
Ugh,
Yeah,
that's
but-
horrible.
I found it really sad because I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I
That's
know sometimes like in Caitlin's case where she just got fired or something, but like 2 people ended up quitting because of the person who was the worst of it all. So I just
And he gets to stay and keep living his
yeah,
life.
This
And-
guy, no, he's not going to keep living his life because this is what's going to happen. This is going to stand as a huge testament, and it's going to be a witness that's kept in the books. Now, it's going to be in the back of people's minds. They might move past it, but when this happens again, people are going to think, well, remember that one time he was accused of that? And what's going to happen is this dude is going to end up getting that company destroyed. Like, people don't forget things. You know, we always hear forgive and forget, but what's the hardest thing about forgiveness is forgetting. Like, this may be like at the time people thinking he's innocent, but as time goes on and stuff, it could be 20 years in the future. This stuff happens again. People don't forget. It's going to get pulled up again. But it depends on how fast the turnover is in the company too.
Right. But it will be on the books. It will be,
Mhm.
That's a good
So-
point.
The question after this was, what was Lone Star's sexual harassment policy? And I feel like we kind of discussed it, but I mean, what I thought it was really just them calling the line and then them having to do like calling the EEO and then having an investigation. But besides that, I feel like no one actually really knew what it was.
Well, I feel like the lawyer needed to call Jack back and say, by the way, I have your caller ID. I know it's you. I'm going to file or I'm going to start an investigation, because they were totally blindsided. They didn't have time to if it should have been where Julie had time to understand what was going on, like understand that he was going to be investigated. She could have talked to other women in the office and see if they have had any experiences, because teaming up against the harasser is unfortunately very effective.
Yeah.
And, and even for Jack to have been able to talk to Julia more and just understand more of what happened, because that just kind of seems like nobody understood what was happening, and like almost that they went to French first.
Well, and I think that was,
he says no, then that's their first thing to go off of.
yeah, I think that wasn't handled, like the legal representative, like you said, she should have informed DeCoste, however you say that last name, that she knew who he was and that she was going to be, instituting an investigation, instead of just doing it and not saying, you know what I mean? That, like you said, they were totally blindsided.
And what if she had, it says that she figured out who he was talking about, but what if she was wrong? What if there are people
what if she was calling from somebody else's phone?
Yeah. So I don't even, that seems very bad that the lawyer went behind their backs.
That's what happened to me. I talked to a trusted manager, and my manager went straight to the guy and told him. And I was told at that time it would be confidential. I was told that none of that information would leave our discussion and that I needed to go talk to the new store manager who would then address the issue with the corporate, Tyler or whatever, the guy who was doing that. And you know what? He went right behind my back. And I will also tell you that I did talk about the issue with some of the other people working there, and that was also brought into the thing when he fired me and said, well, I heard you were telling this and this to people. And so then that backfired on me too. So I think, she was probably also thinking, if I tell people about it, is that also going to get me fired?
Yeah.
If they think I'm spreading rumors.
Yeah, that definitely, I didn't think about that really does need to be part of the policy of like who is involved in each step of what happens. Like it's,
and who are you allowed to talk about it with?
Yeah.
and like in your conversation, Caitlin, with that, if he knew that he needed to report it, he should not have told you that was going to remain confidential.
Right.
And I mean, the lawyer did that well, saying you need to report this. But what she also should have said is, I don't know who you are, but I know there's something going on, so I have to report this.
Yeah.
And it was pretty obvious. It's pretty evident that they didn't really have a policy in place. I mean, this guy DaCosta didn't know what to do, so he called legal counsel, but like obviously there wasn't any training really because nobody really knew what to do. There was no, yeah. So everyone was just sort of like winging it, and so it was just a mess from the beginning, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the last question, which I feel like we've pretty much answered, is could clear policies and procedures have helped to avoid any of the final consequences of this case? And I just think it could have avoided pretty much everything that happened in this case besides, well, maybe even the sexual harassment claim, because I feel like if he knew, if what's his name, French, yeah, if he knew like what was allowed in the company, I mean, he knew this wasn't allowed, but if he knew like how strict they were going to be, then it probably wouldn't even happen in the first place, which is sad. But I just think it's important for us to like realize that like I think we all know it now, but like there has to be something there, like the church does. Everything is clear, it's stated, and even though it could be a huge pain, it just protects everyone in the end.
Right.
I agree.
It has to be done. Yeah, it has to be done.
Yeah. This is making me feel uncomfortable and like scared to go to work, kind of. I work for a financial planner, and he's a man, and I trust him. I mean, he's a good church member, and I trust him. But every time I go into his office, there is always that little thing of like, do I shut the door or not?
Right.
And I just hate that is something I have to think about because he's a great man.
Yeah, and you don't have any reason to.
But I don't know what are other people gonna think, or what?
Right.
What is? Right. I don't know. I just.
Yeah, I totally get it.
Hate it.
It sucks.
Right.
It does.
Ladies, I have to go. I have to drive to campus and park in the free parking, which is all the way out in Egypt, and then walk to my building. So I have to go. Thank you so much. I will talk to you guys all soon, and I'll have that paper in tonight.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Well, we did all the questions, so
Cool.
Yeah.
we're done.
All right,
We're doing that, but yeah. So I'll have my part in by tonight.
Okay.
Actually, it should be pretty soon. I just have to copy and paste, but
That's fine. Yeah, like I said, more than likely I'm not going to get till in the morning anyway, so
Okay.
That's fine.
Thanks, Marianne, for doing all that.
No worries. Thanks for doing your part. You guys, I think, have the harder part, so.
I was we have 4 papers to do.
Yeah, this is one of 4.
So we can each have a turn being the editor, I think.
That's fine. Yeah, if we want to switch around, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So that worked out well.
Cool.
Very cool. Well, Paisley, you did great.
Yeah.
thank you. I feel like I struggled a bit, but
no, I think you helped us stay on topic because there was a like.
Caitlin kept drifting, but I was like, I don't want to be rude, but I didn't know what to do. But
no, you did really good keeping us on topic, and that was a harder one too. Like there was a lot involved in that whole. So,
lots of feelings.
Yes, lots of passionate opinions. So no, you did great. Thanks, Paisley.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys, have a good night. We'll see you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.